RuneScape 3 has 4 different combat styles that we can use in our beloved game. We have the 3 old school styles with mage, ranged and melee, and then we also have, since a few years, Necromancy. And since Necromancy came out, it is the dominant style of the game, and most of the people are using it. Even though Jagex recently updated the old combat styles so they get used more, it is still the most used combat style. I think one thing we can take a look at to get the numbers clear is a survey that Silence, a fellow RS3 content creator, did, where he 2 years ago asked his community what combat style they are using, and the majority, 56% of people, said they are using Necromancy. After the combat rework, he did the same survey again, and even though the number got smaller, still 44% of people are still using Necromancy. And the same goes, by the way, also for me, because here you can see that I voted for Mage, and at the time I also used Mage, but since a few weeks I noticed that a lot of the time I am again using just Necromancy over and over again. And since then I asked myself, why? What is the reason that I still use Necromancy even though the combat styles got reworked, are easier to use, and if you look at the top levels, we can clearly see that Necromancy is the worst combat style of all 4. And the reason, I think, is pretty simple, because there are actually 2 reasons. First of all, it is the ease of use and the get into level that is way lower with Necromancy, and second, the quality of life. But what do I mean by this? It is pretty simple. If I want to use Necromancy, I can just take out my Necromancy gear and go to a boss. Then I have my Revo bar that you can see right here that is set up that I have my conjures that get spawned automatically, the command ghost ability gets used all the time as soon as I can, and also the command skeleton ability. And this alone is a lot of damage that comes out in the combat style. I mean, just look when I activate the command skeleton ability to this dummy, and then I activate it, you can see that he does so much damage to that dummy just without me doing anything. And then I also have in my Revo bar the Necrosis stack build-up and the Souls build-up, which are just abilities that prepare myself to then use my Finger of Death and my Volley of Souls, which are high-level enhanced ability. So the combat style is really simple to use, and I think most of the players that start using it will get their hand with it pretty easy. I also learned that it is way more forgiving because you have a lot of heal built into the kit with the Conjure, with the Ghost for example, and tankiness with the Phantom. And I learned that especially when 2 friends of mine who recently started playing RuneScape, and they first started with one using melee and the other one using range as their combat style, and got pretty frustrated as soon as they came into PVMing. And then I told both of them, just use Necromancy, and after that they had just a breeze. And I mean, one of my friends does not really use his keyboard when playing RuneScape, so he still uses his mouse to click his abilities and was still able to kill stuff like 1000 Enrage or Glacier without having too much problems. So Necromancy is just really easy to understand and really easy to use. And even though the other combat styles got way simpler, it is still way more intense to use them. I learned that especially when using magic, because when I want to go, for example, and kill Nakata with magic, I am able to, but I also have to think about what ability do I use. When do I use Tsunami? When do I use my Sunshine? And when I'm in my Sunshine and have Tsunami buff active, what do I do to crit? Then I have to use my Greater Concentrated Blast as often as I can, so I can enhance my crit chance, so I get more adrenaline, so yada yada yada. There are a lot of thoughts that I have to use when I'm using Mage, and with Necromancy, I just simply go in there, have Revolution, they use my Conjures, they build up my stacks, and the only really combo that I have is when I activate Living Death, that I use Death Skulls as often as I can, and in the best case scenario, I also use my Finger of Death in the Living Death ability. So as you can see, way simpler, way easier to use, and this is one of the biggest reasons I myself use Necromancy over and over again, even though I have to level up my magic level for my comp cape, because when I'm tired after work, I don't want to spend so many thoughts when just going for a few easy Nakatra kills, you know? And the second thing that I think is a big problem with the Necromancy combat style is the quality of life. And we can see that when we just look at the abilities that we get with the Necromancy combat style. I already talked about the tankiness and the heal that you get with the conjures, but if we then look at the incantations that we have, we can see that there is stuff like the Bone Shield and Darkness ability that is basically necessary to use even with other combat styles. So if you are a new player, you simply also have to level Necromancy to level 86 to unlock Darkness, so you can use Darkness with the other combat styles because it is simply so strong and makes you basically 20% tankier. And also the Great Bone Shield ability that gets unlocked at level 73, that is just so much quality of life because you don't have to shield switch to use, for example, a Resonance. You basically have to train that and grind out the skill at least so far so you can use a Nexus or take a Nexus with you and then use that ability instead of a shield switch. Sure, you can shield switch if you want, but it is just way worse and more annoying to use. So for new level players, people that are really low level, you basically have to tell them, even though you want to use ranged mage or melee, you should just still grind some necromancy levels just to at least use these abilities. Which is a kind of bummer because level 73 or even 86 is not that easy to grind out. And these are the abilities that you can use with the other combat styles. We then also have Split Soul, Invoke Death, and Threads of Fate, which are insane incantations that you can only use with necromancy. And yes, stuff like Split Soul also exists with ranged, but with Necromancy to unlock, I just need to unlock Soul Split and then to grind out the combat style to level 92 and also grind out the Will of Souls so I can unlock it, and that's basically it. So a little bit of questing and a little bit of leveling the combat style, and that's it. But for ranged, you also need the questing, the unlock of Soul Split and stuff, but then you also need to spend about 1 billion coins on gear for an Eldritch Crossbow and an Essence of Finality just to have that ability usable for the combat style. Which is just kinda insane if you compare this when you look at it with those raw numbers. Same also goes for Threads of Fate. Yes, we have Greater Chain with magic, but Threads of Fate is just unlocked by using the combat style, basically leveling it up and then using or unlocking it at Well of Souls. And with magic, I have to go to Raksha and farm the Greater Chain ability or spend about 200 to 300 mil just to unlock that ability, and then I maybe also need a Roaming perk just to have it on the same level. It is just kinda insane how much quality of life is built into Necromancy just by unlocking and playing the combat style. Which is no wonder that my friends never went back to another combat style ever since they have started using Necromancy. And then also one insane point, in my opinion, is the cost of the combat style. We can see this if we just compare some of the prices. So here we can see the website geprices.com from Ryan, which tracks current GE prices. And when we, for example, look at the tier 95 weapons and what they cost, we can see that for Necromancy, I have to spend about 600 million coins to unlock the tier 95 on and offhand for my combat style. If I want to do the same with melee, for example, yeah, I have the 2 length weapons, so the Dark Shard and the Dark Sliver of length, which costs alone, one weapon, about the same amount as the 2 of Necromancy combat style. And if we want to buy the Exec Kill also, it is 2.1 billion. So more than 3 times as much as I have to spend for the Necromancy weapon. We can also see that magic, which is kinda cheap at the moment, still costs me double the amount to get the Fractured Stuff of Armadil than I have to spend for the 2 weapons in the Necromancy combat style. And ranged is at 1.7 bill, so also way more expensive. So if you are a new player that tries to get into the game, these other combat styles are so far away that you, I think, almost naturally start using Necromancy. Because it offers a lot of quality of life, less grinding, way more accessible, and way easier to use. And I think this is kind of the problem that we have with the Necromancy combat style. Because sure, the combat update was a step in the right direction. And if you want to go into the highest levels of PVMing, you have to start using different combat styles, especially if you want to go for Grandmaster achievements and all that shenanigans. But for some casual players, some mid-level and low-level players, some beginners into the game, Necromancy is just the logic combat style to use. Because it is so much more forgiving, easy to use, and has so much more quality of life built in. But the question now is this a problem for the game? I think yes and no. Because on one side, it is really cool that we have this easy accessible combat style that makes a lot of content accessible for people that would not have access to this content if they don't use Necromancy. This is a big W of the combat style. But I also think it's kinda sad because a lot of people will never ever even use different combat styles, for example by friends at the moment, because it is just a way too high entry level still. And if I look at how much fun I had exploring mage as a combat style, I think it is also pretty sad that it does not get used all that much, and it has such a high entry level. But what do you think? Is it a problem that Necromancy is so easy to use and so much more accessible than the other combat styles? Are you a Necromancer yourself, or are you someone that, for example, does not use Necromancy at all? Let me know in the comments. And now I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope you found this video a little bit of entertaining. Don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe, and I see you in the next time. Bye!